I'm on one this morning. I just need to rant. I'm so tired of quite literally everything just going up in pricing.
The cost of living in America is just a scam. And I think more and more of us are seeing that, especially on an app like this where we can see what people are paying for life outside of these borders.
Life's so damn high you can't even afford to die. Have you seen the cost of caskets and funerals? Man, when I die, just throw my ass in the ocean. Fuck it.
When we were kids, everyone dreamed of becoming famous or becoming a billionaire. But in America, in 2026, millions of people just dream of having a normal life. Because even a basic life is becoming a luxury in this wealthy country. I am not trying to scare you. The reality is that a minimum quality of life is now out of reach for the bottom 60% of American households. And we are not talking about mansions or luxury cars, just a place to live a car, to get to work, enough money for healthcare, raising children, and handling emergencies when something goes wrong. But today, most Americans do not earn enough income to reach that minimum standard of living. And while that is happening, the biggest players just keep getting richer. So where is the money going? Why do Americans keep working harder and still cannot afford basic needs? Today, I want to look directly at that question with you, and maybe the scariest part is not some huge collapse, but the fact that we are struggling just to live a normal life. The basic standard of living in America has changed. Before I get to the truth, you really want to hear how many Americans cannot even reach a minimum standard of living. Let me clear up one thing first. What does minimum living actually mean? Because if you still think having food in the refrigerator and a roof over your head is enough, I think that definition has been outdated for a long time. In 2026, someone may not be starving or homeless and still have absolutely no stable life.
Now, this analysis considers whether people can afford food and shelter, and it also looks at the affordability of technology tools for work and education, as well as health and childcare.
You see, a minimum standard of living is not just food and housing. It also includes healthcare, childcare, and the basic technology needed for work and education. That may sound like the list is getting way too long, but try taking those things away one at a time. Without internet, a phone, or a computer, how do you look for a job? How do you work? How do you handle paperwork? Without transportation in many parts of America, it can be hard just to get to work. Without childcare, parents may be forced to reduce their hours or quit working. Without access to healthcare, one illness can break apart this entire chain of daily life, and that is when everything starts to feel ridiculous. You work to make money, but a huge part of that money has to be spent just to keep you able to continue working. In other words, before your paycheck can buy you a better life, it already has to buy your right to keep participating in the system. And this is where the American dream starts to sound pretty bitter. The old logic was simple: get a job, buy a car, buy a house, raise a family, save money, retire. Work was supposed to be the ladder that moved you up, but if all your income is already being swallowed by food, housing, transportation, healthcare, and childcare, what is left to help you climb to the next step? Do not misunderstand me. We are not talking about luxury cars. We are not talking about expensive vacations. We are not talking about a dream house. We are only talking about being able to live on your own, go to work, take care of your health, raise children, and not have one small emergency destroy your entire month. So if that is what a minimum standard of living really means, how many Americans are actually reaching it? 60% of American households cannot reach a minimum standard of living.
A new report found a, quote, minimal quality of life is out of reach for the bottom 60% of American households.
60%. Do not just treat that like some number in a report and assume this belongs to some group of poor people who have nothing to do with you. The report says the bottom 60% of American households do not reach the minimum standard of living based on the measure we just talked about. 6 out of 10. That is big enough that I think the question is no longer who is struggling. It should be how many of us are actually doing okay. Because this crisis has one thing about it that can really fool you. It does not necessarily look like a crisis. You can still wake up at 6 in the morning, drive to work, get a regular paycheck, pay rent, buy groceries, take your children to school, and look completely normal to everyone around you. Nobody looks at you and thinks this person is in financial trouble. And only you know what happens if rent goes up a few $100s next month, the car breaks down, right after you just paid the insurance, you have to miss a few days of work because you are sick, or your child suddenly needs unexpected medical care. That is the part I find most worrying. The line between I am still okay and I am in a crisis has gotten so thin that a lot of people only need one small push to end up on the other side. Someone in their 30s may have worked for years, have a spouse and children, and still have to move back in with their parents because rent keeps rising faster than their ability to maintain a life of their own. A family may be able to pay everything this month, but one major car repair can completely change the math. Experiences like that show up again and again in viewer reactions under the report.
This is not an exaggeration. Every $500 that I make, I spend $2,000. Like every large sum of money that I make, I spend double that, if not even more. And it's not because I want to be. It's because everything just is like, it's just bill. Everything's more expensive, but the quality of everything's going, fucking second bet. When will this end?
And the saddest part is that many Americans do not even seem surprised by this anymore. Prices go up, wages do not keep up, cut one expense to cover another, put off buying something you need until the next paycheck. For a lot of people, this is no longer a short period of financial trouble. It is becoming the way they organize their entire lives. So do not ask yourself whether you officially count as poor. Ask a more practical question: if a bill suddenly hits next week, does your life stay standing? Because the problem is not that one thing is getting more expensive. Almost everything they are forced to pay for is taking money out of the same paycheck at the same time. Where is the American paycheck going?
Is it just me, or is this inflation getting out of hand? I mean, everything's gone up. Beef prices, your rent, your insurance, your property taxes, everything's went up except your pay. And if you're sick and tired of this inflation and not getting an increase in pay...
If you are still wondering where your money goes every month, the uncomfortable answer is this: it does not disappear in one place. It gets taken piece by piece. Housing takes some, the car takes some, groceries take some, insurance takes another piece. Then utilities, childcare, and healthcare split whatever is left. One increase by itself may not knock you down, but when almost everything gets more expensive, comes due at the same time, and demands money from the same paycheck, you start to understand why you work every month and still have almost nothing left at the end. And this does not just exist in your imagination. The cost of living has gone up, inflation is still a risk, and interest rates may not easily return to the very low levels Americans got used to after the financial crisis or during the early part of the pandemic. Put simply, life is already expensive, and if you have to borrow money to pay for that life, it becomes even more expensive.
Since when are houses in the suburbs $1.3 million? In what world is somebody my age ever going to be able to afford a house in the motherfucking suburbs for $1.3 million?
Let's start with the expense that is hardest to avoid: housing. You can eat out less, cancel an entertainment service, or put off buying a new phone, but rent or a mortgage still has to be paid, and once that is paid, you are not done. Electricity, water, insurance, taxes, repairs are still waiting. For many families, simply keeping a stable roof over their heads takes such a large share of income that there is not much left before they even think about anything else.
Hey, let me ask you guys this: who the hell can afford a new car these days? I mean, I drive by these lots all day, every day, and there's never anybody there, and they're always loaded with cars. I went in one day, I looked at a couple of trucks, and I'm talking like $100,000.
Then there is the car. For many Americans, a car is not something they buy to show off. It is how they get to work, take their children to school, buy groceries, and get to medical appointments. But buying the car is only the beginning. Then come the monthly payment, loan, interest, insurance, gas maintenance, and repairs. You have to pay for the car so you can get to work, then use the money you earn from that job to keep paying for the car. One serious breakdown can throw the entire monthly budget off course.
I just want to say that these grocery prices are so ridiculous, and it's really starting to piss me off because it feels like all of our extra income is going straight to groceries.
Housing is paid, the car still has to be paid, but life does not stop and wait for you to deal with things one at a time. Groceries still have to be bought, the electric bill still comes, internet, phones, fuel, insurance, and all kinds of recurring payments keep showing up. Each one by itself may not seem too terrible, but together they add up very quickly. And that is where a lot of people start feeling like money is constantly flowing out without understanding where it all went.
I'm really just fed the fuck up. Like, I was thinking of taking my son out of preschool because of how damn expensive it is.
Then come two expenses that you cannot simply say cut them and move on: childcare and healthcare. The report includes both in the very definition of a minimum standard of living. The reason is obvious. If you have young children and nobody to watch them, you may not be able to work. If you get sick and cannot get treatment, you may no longer be able to work the way you did before. It is ridiculous. You make money to pay for the things that allow you to keep making money. You pay for childcare so you can go to work. You pay for the car so you can get to work. You pay for healthcare so you can stay healthy enough to work. You pay for internet and a phone so you can keep your job and handle basic things in life. And in the end, almost everything circles back and takes money from the very job that is supposed to support you. What happens if the cash is not enough? People borrow. But when interest rates are high, being short on money itself makes you pay even more money. The report also emphasizes that interest rates may stay higher than they used to be, which means borrowing for a house, borrowing for a car, or using credit all becomes more painful. The item itself is already expensive. If you also have to borrow money to buy it, you pay even more for money you did not already have. That is why so many people feel like they work and work but never go anywhere. Their paycheck no longer helps them move forward, it only helps them stay in the same place. And when you have to keep working constantly just to avoid falling backward, what you slowly lose is not only money, you lose the ability to make your own decisions about your life. Americans are not just losing money, they are losing independence. At this point, I do not think the problem is just how much money you have in your bank account anymore. The scarier question is how much control do you still have over your own life? Because when your money is only enough to keep everything from falling apart, your choices start disappearing too. You want to live on your own, but rent forces you to move back in with your parents. You want to change jobs, but you are afraid because your current job is tied to insurance and bills that have to be paid every month. You want to take a few weeks off to find a different direction, but your bank account will not allow it. You want to have children move, learn a new skill, or simply stop for a while, but before every decision, the same question appears. Can I afford this?
I'm so angry and I'm so done with the American medical system.
That is where I think the idea of minimum living becomes much more cruel. You can be over 30, have worked for years, have your own family, even have children, and still end up moving back in with your parents because the cost of maintaining a home of your own has become more than you can handle. That exact kind of experience appears in viewer reactions to the report. And I want to make one thing very clear. Living with your parents is not failure. Having roommates is not failure either. Getting help from family is nothing to be ashamed of. The problem is somewhere else. If you do those things because you want to, that is a choice. But if you do them because there is no other choice left, then you have lost part of your independence. Emergency savings work the same way. People usually think of them as money for fixing a car or paying an unexpected bill, but emergency savings actually buy you something even more important: the ability to say no. No to a job you cannot stand anymore. No to taking extra hours just because you are afraid of running out of money. No to a home that costs too much. No to borrowing even more just to survive another month. When there is no financial cushion left, a lot of the no in your life disappears too. And this is where the story becomes even more uncomfortable. While more and more people are shrinking their choices just to stay in the same place, at the top of the economy, some people are building more and more wealth and gaining more and more choices. That gap is what we need to look at next. Ordinary people are getting poorer, while the rich keep getting richer.
The biggest welfare queens in this country are the giant corporations that don't pay a penny in federal taxes.
And this is where I start to find the story really hard to accept. Ordinary people are told to save more, buy less, work more, keep the old car for a few more years, put off buying a house, even put off having children. Put simply, if life is too expensive, you're supposed to make your life smaller. But when you look at the people at the top, you see a completely different story. One side is figuring out which restaurant meal vacation or purchase they have to give up this month. The other side may be figuring out how much more their wealth has grown. One side has to think carefully about every bill. The other has enough money that an unexpected bill barely changes their life at all. And that contrast is what really makes people angry. Take something very simple. Your car breaks down and needs $2,000 in repairs. If you have savings, that is a bad day. You get annoyed, pay the bill, and move on. But if you are living paycheck to paycheck, $2,000 can turn into credit card debt, borrowing from family, paying rent late, or pushing another bill into next month. The same broken car. For one person, it is an inconvenience. For the other, it can become a crisis. That is why the wealth gap is not just about how big your house is or how expensive your car is. It decides how much ability you have to absorb a shock without letting the rest of your life collapse with it. And when you keep cutting one thing after another, it is very hard not to start asking questions. Why am I working more but still having to live smaller? How can a country create enormous amounts of wealth while so many families still struggle just to hold on to a basic life? That is where explanations like corporate greed, huge executive pay, billionaires' tax policy, and wealth inequality start coming up naturally. I am not saying that is the whole answer, but the feeling of unfairness is easy to understand. Struggling is already hard enough. Struggling while watching other people keep building more wealth is what makes people angry. You start wondering whether workers are being paid too little for the value they create, whether profits are being prioritized over wages, whether an economy can really be called strong if so many people living in it are still only one bill away from a crisis. But wait, if we blame everything on rich people and corporations, is that maybe a little too easy too? Is a $70,000 car really a basic need? What about constantly buying new phones, eating out, shopping subscription services, and all the spending choices we actually do control? There is also a strong argument that some Americans have raised their standard of living too high and then started calling all of those things necessary. So who is really responsible? Is the cost of living too high, or are Americans asking for too much? All right, by now there are probably two sides. One side says, see the system is the problem. The other says, no, people are just spending beyond their means. And I think both sides should hold off on celebrating because this story is not simple enough to pick one person to blame. To be fair, some people really do overspend. If you make $60,000 a year but try to carry a $70,000 car, I cannot say the whole problem is the economy. Constantly buying new phones, eating out too much shopping to maintain an image, paying for a long list of monthly services, all of that can make a budget worse. That argument comes up very clearly. Too many people believe part of the problem comes from cars that are too expensive, phones that are too expensive, and spending that is not truly necessary. But wait, suppose starting tomorrow you become the perfect spender. No new phone, no random shopping, less eating out, cancel every service you do not need, keep the old car as long as possible. Good. Now look again at the biggest expenses. Housing is still there, insurance is still there, groceries still have to be bought, your children still need care, illness still has to be treated. You may save $20 here and $50 there, but if rent goes up a few $100s, the math is still very hard to beat. The car is the clearest example. Yes, you can blame someone for buying a car they cannot afford, but in many parts of America, they still need a car to get to work. So I can blame you for buying a car that is too expensive, but can I blame you for needing a car? When you get to housing, healthcare, and childcare, saying just spend less gets even harder. You can move into a smaller place, but how small, you can move farther away. But then what about commuting time, gas money, and your child's school? If your child needs care so you can work, how exactly do you cut that expense? If you get sick, is the solution just not to get treatment? The report treats healthcare and childcare as part of a minimum standard of living precisely because both are directly connected to your ability to maintain your life and your job. So is it the system's fault or the individual's? If you overspend, you have to take responsibility, but you do not set the rent interest rates, insurance prices, or hospital bills yourself. On the other hand, problems in the system do not mean every bad financial decision gets a free pass. The better question is this: after a family cuts the things they really can cut, do they still have enough money to live independently? If the answer is still no, then they are no longer cutting spending. They are starting to cut pieces of their own life. The American dream is being lowered to simple survival. The scariest thing to me is not that more and more Americans have to live at the minimum. The scariest thing is that we are slowly starting to treat that kind of life as normal. Working 2 jobs, living with roommates, keeping an old car until it absolutely cannot go any longer, putting off buying a house, putting off having children, having no emergency savings. In the past, those things sounded like ways someone might get through a difficult period. Now, for a lot of people, they are becoming the way they have to organize their entire lives. Those kinds of adjustments also show up again and again in the experiences people shared around this report. And that is what I find sad. A temporary solution is only temporary when you know it will eventually end. But if you live with roommates year after year, keep working extra jobs without stopping, depend on your parents longer than you expected, and keep delaying one plan after another, then you are no longer getting through a hard time. It has become your way of life. When that lasts long enough, people do something very natural. They lower their expectations. Living on your own used to be a normal milestone of adulthood. Having a job that paid enough to live on was something people expected. Buying a house was a goal you could work toward. Starting a family, having children, saving money, and preparing for retirement were the next steps. Now, for some Americans, those same things are starting to sound like privileges. And I think this is the biggest change of all. It is not just that the American dream has become more expensive. People are starting to wonder whether they should even keep dreaming about those things. If this pressure continues, I do not think the near future necessarily has to look like some huge collapse that everybody can see. It may become so normal that we simply get used to it. Young people leave home later. Multiple generations live together longer. People buy homes later, have children later working. Extra jobs becomes normal, while savings and retirement keep getting pushed farther away. There will not be one morning when America wakes up and announces that the American dream is gone. It will just move a little farther away, and ambition changes with it. In the past, you worked to move forward. Now, the goal may simply be to keep the place you are renting, keep the car running, pay this month's bills, and hope nothing goes wrong next month. When the biggest goal is no longer moving up, but simply not falling behind, then it is not the same American dream anymore. Of course, some people will argue that every generation has had to sacrifice, and that Americans today are just used to living too comfortably. Fine. But when did having your own place to live, transportation to get to work, the ability to raise children, and enough emergency savings to survive one car breakdown become expectations that were too high? If those things are now considered luxuries, what else is an ordinary person supposed to give up before they are finally told they are living within their means? We started this story by asking what a minimum standard of living means. But maybe the scarier question is, how much lower are we willing to push the word minimums? Because if someone has to work more, live smaller delay, having a family delay, buying a home, and constantly hope nothing goes wrong just to make it from one month to the next, I am not sure we are talking about quality of life anymore. Maybe we are just learning to call barely getting by normal. Becoming a great person is hard. Becoming a billionaire is even harder. But there is one thing I never thought would become this difficult: living a normal life. No mansion, no luxury car, no vacation several times a year, just a job that pays enough to live on a place, to live a car reliable enough to get to work, the ability to take care of your family, get medical treatment when you need it, and save a little money for tomorrow. That does not sound like some huge dream. It used to be the foundation of a normal life. But in America in 2026, even that foundation is getting harder to reach. And what worries me more is that we may be getting used to it, getting used to working a second job, getting used to putting off buying a home, getting used to being afraid to have children, getting used to one car breakdown being enough to throw the entire month into chaos. One thing after another moves out of reach. Until one day we look back and realize the definition of normal changed without us even noticing when it happened. I want to ask you one very real question. Is your life changing this way too? Is there something you were sure you would achieve a few years ago, but now it feels farther and farther away? A home, a car, a family savings, or simply the feeling that you do not have to worry every time a bill shows up. Share it with me. I truly want to read your story. I hope this channel can be a place where we do something that is becoming more and more rare, speak openly about what is happening without sugarcoating it, without rushing to judge, and by listening to each other's experiences. If you want to keep looking with me at the real picture of America, not the America in slogans, but the America people are actually living in every day, subscribe to the channel and stay with me. We still have a lot to talk about.